By now, you may have heard the phrase, not your keys, not your coins. There is a lot of truth to that, but there's also a lot of risk and responsibility to that, and that is the purpose of today's episode. Thank you for joining me again. As I just mentioned, we're going to talk about Bitcoin custody, or in general terms, cryptocurrencies custody. So if you're getting started, you may have heard already this phrase of not your keys, not your coins, but where do I get these keys and how do I properly store them? So let's start by saying, if you're a beginner, most likely the least complex and the least risky way of you to getting exposure to Bitcoin and to cryptocurrencies will be not through an exchange or not through private custody of your private keys, but through an ETF. An ETF is an exchange traded fund, which will be available in your traditional brokerage account. And right now there are ETFs that have exposure to Bitcoin. Some others have exposure to Ether. There are new ETFs that are starting to get crafted for new cryptocurrencies. But the most traditional way, if you're not wanting to go through the ETF route, for you to get exposure to cryptocurrencies will be through an exchange. An exchange is a digital business, a digital portal where you will connect your bank account or you will fund it with some dollars, some fiat currencies that you will basically log into the system. And the system will allow you to exchange those dollars, those pesos, those euros for a list of available cryptocurrencies that they have for you to trade with. And you can do those exchanges online. It's pretty straightforward. It's pretty simple. But the problem with exchanges is that they hold the private keys that lock on or unlock the value of those cryptocurrencies that you're seeing in their portals. So that's where the phrase, not your keys, not your coins, come into play, because if the exchange is fraudulent, if the exchange goes south and goes broke, if the exchange doesn't have proper control of their private keys and gets hacked, if the exchange basically decides to just freeze your money or your tokens in this case, they can do it, and you're exposed to all of those risks and liabilities by exchanges. But on the flip side, it's the most easy and straightforward way for you to acquire and hold some cryptocurrencies without the risk that comes with holding the private keys on your own. So on an exchange, my recommendation will be, please do your research. Please make sure that the exchange that you're selecting is one with certain track record, with certain reputation, with worldwide availability, with, if possible, maybe it's a public company or it's some company that is big enough that it's unlikely to fail. And no matter which exchange you choose, ultimately make sure that you don't park any meaningful amount of cryptocurrencies or dollars or whatever value you want to store out there, because ultimately, if they decide just to freeze, if they get sued by the SEC, if they go belly up, whatever adversary circumstance that they need to go through, it is a risk for you not being able to access your value that you have there. Now, the other risk is, as I just mentioned, you're seeing a balance of how much Bitcoin you have on that exchange. You can easily swap it for other cryptocurrencies or for back to dollars and then withdraw all of that. That's very nice. But at the end of the day, if you want to receive crypto from some other player, from some other entity, they will give you a public address. That public address is the one that you will share the other party for them to send over the cryptocurrency to that address. You will see it on your balance, but what the exchanges will never give you is the private key to that public address. So it holds true that in this case, they are the ones holding custody of those keys, and any risks or any exposure that those private keys have, it's risk and exposure that you are also absorbing. So that's where, if you're already storing some significant value, if you already feel comfortable with the mechanics and the understanding of public addresses and private keys, you want to take the next step, which will be actually holding custody of your private keys. Now, where do these private keys originate from? The private keys originate from wallets, and there are different flavors of wallets. There are wallets that are software based. There are paper wallets that you can just basically create offline entirely. I will talk briefly about hardware wallets, which are devices that store and generate private keys completely isolated from any PC, any computer. And by doing that, you're preventing that those private keys ever get stored in your machine, ever get published into a cloud, ever get exposure to a hacker that is maybe sniffing on your monitor or it's dropping, whatever the case may be of risk within your PC is mitigated by having your keys stored in this hardware device. I'm going to put an image of a couple devices over here that you may have seen in the past. What these devices do is essentially just generate private keys and public addresses. And the way for you to keep control of your Bitcoin or your crypto is by storing those keys offline. So the hardware wallet, when you're setting it up for the first time, it won't give you an individual private key. It will give you a seed phrase. You can consider a seed phrase as the equivalent of a master key or a skeleton key that basically opens, or in this case, is able to generate an infinite number of public addresses and private keys combinations. But that master key, if you lose it, you're completely screwed, because all the addresses and all the keys that have been derived from this seed phrase will be completely lost forever and exposed forever, since someone else may have access to that capability of regenerating them. So when you're setting up your hardware wallet, you want to make sure that the seed phrase that pops up when you're creating it is stored, written down on a paper or in an offline setting, never in a computer, never in some digital form, so that if the device breaks, if you lose it, if something happened, you have kept offline a backup for regenerating the very same wallet on another device or on a computer or wherever you want. There is no constraint or association of wallets to private keys and public addresses. At the end of the day, that combination of public address and private key can be generated in any wallet. So you need to understand that a wallet is an instance that allows you to interact with this combination of public addresses and private keys, and that instance can be replicated in multiple wallets as long as you have your seed phrase. So you need to make sure that the seed phrase is the one that you store very safely. And there are multiple ways of doing this. There are engraving in metal. There are multi-sig wallets where you have different signers for you to be able to send a transaction into the network. But just for this episode, know that that is the significance of not your keys, not your coins. When you hold your keys, you're 100% custodian of that cryptocurrency that you're storing, and there is no password reset here. There is no let me call my provider. There is no provider. The wallet provider is just giving you the technology to store on your own your keys, but they don't have any backup. And if they do offer you a backup, be careful, because that is also a risk for you to lose your coins, because now all of a sudden they also have some mechanism and some exposure to your keys. So in any case, please make sure that you do your research as well on the wallets that you will be using whenever you want to take that next step of storing your own keys. And how it works is you have your cryptocurrency on an exchange, then on your wallet, you have generated a public address. You can send from your exchange the Bitcoin that you want to that public address. That public address and that transaction will be stored in the Bitcoin blockchain, but the private keys and the capability for you to transact with that Bitcoin that is now publicly available as stored in that public address is held in that hardware wallet that you have, and only you have the control and the power to move it. If you lose your private keys, that is Bitcoin that will be forever lost in perpetuity. There is no password reset again. That's why you see on the news this guy that was trying to dig on a dumpster some old hard drive where he maybe stored the private keys for a lot of Bitcoin. I think it was $800 million worth of Bitcoin. And the reality is that he has now given up because it's near impossible to find that. And yeah, I think it doesn't make any sense. But be careful. I mean, that is the whole purpose of storing your keys. It comes with risk. It comes with sovereignty. It comes with full control. But again, it needs to be done in a proper way for you to mitigate the risks and actually enjoy the benefits of self-custody, self-sovereignty, and full control. In any case, hopefully this has been valuable to you. If it has, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one. Until then, bye.